Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 6. We're super excited. And before we get started and talk about our topic today, I'd like to introduce our cast here. I'm Sam.
I'm Sarah Kate.
I am Rick Gross.
Today's topic is another interesting one. It is how to love other people with different personality types. And we should start by saying that, God made us all unique with our own style, our own interest, our own qualities, personality traits. And it's easy to want to hang out with people with very similar personalities. Like if you're an A type, I feel like we kind of get along or we understand each other pretty easily. But I think we really all need to realize that it is God making us this special way, right?
Yeah.
So as we get started, a couple questions here for you guys that really have been on our hearts as we talked. Let's start out with the first one. What are the basic problems that occur with people of different personality types?
I know. So I was very blessed because I started working for an organization, and for the first, I think, 2 or 3 years that I was there, we did like every personality test. We did like Myers-Briggs and Smalley, and down the road a couple years later, we did the Enneagram. And so I had no idea about really any of it. And so it was funny because after we did it, of course, the first person that I shared with was my wife, like all these like wonderful things. And I'll tell you, like, I had always taken for granted why my wife acted the way that she did with certain situations. And let me give you like a specific example. So I am an extrovert, like to the highest percent I know, right?
Whoa.
Yeah, we're crazy to think, right?
Shocked.
So I'm an extrovert. Like I love being around people. Like I get energy from it. It drives me. It fuels me. I get a lot of joy from it. So, to paint you a picture, like, so we'd go to parties together. And so we would get ready to go to a party and, we'd be walking up to the house. And in my mind, I'm like, man, I can't wait because I'm going to leave here with like 15 new friends. I'm going to hear some stories. Like, it's going to be great. And my wife would, look at me and like grab my arm a little tight and look at me and goes, please don't leave me. Right. Because my wife is more introverted than I am. And, especially when she walks into an environment where she doesn't know a lot of people, she's just not comfortable with that. Whereas I'm super comfortable. So what would happen is I would buzz around the party and meet all these people, and she would kind of be off on her own, not really feeling comfortable with that. So, I've become more aware of her personality in that, so that now I know, like, okay, this isn't a comfortable place. This isn't always a comfortable place for my wife to be. So I'm going to stand by her and be with her so that I can include her in conversations so that she can kind of participate when she's ready, as opposed to just like, well, honey, like, go talk to people. Like, I don't know what's wrong with you, right? Because that's how I was at the beginning. That's how I was early on. And it would be really frustrating. Or like we'd go to a party and we'd get done and I'd be like, all right, so we're going to watch a movie? And she'd be like, I'm tired. I'm going to bed. And I'm like, what do you mean you're going to bed? Like, it's only like 11:30, right? So, but it was because I just got done having my energy filled to the brim. Meanwhile, because she's more introverted, it actually sucked all the energy out of her. So she's like, I need to rest and recharge, because of all what I just expended. So, my journey with personality types, has been educational for me, but also it hit really close to home with me because of the dynamic and how different my wife's personality is from mine.
Yeah. I think my first exposure to personality types was probably sometime when I was in middle school. And my parents and I had all taken a similar personality test. And I remember thinking it was the funniest thing because they're both like very similar personalities. So they're both over here. And then there's me all the way over here. And it was like, things make a little more sense now. This is okay. I get it. And like every single personality test my parents and I both taken, they're both over here. And then there's me just winging it out in the world. And that is helpful in how that looks as an adult is I don't think of myself as the most extroverted person, like especially compared to someone like you, Rick. I'd be like, not really. And yet, I'll say like, oh, I'm not that extroverted. And then I'm like, I'm going to invite 30 people over to my house every week during Christmas for the Christmas movie of the week. And what happened last week, 2 of my friends, I was like, oh my gosh, you guys live in the same apartment complex. And they ended up going home together because I gave one of them a ride and she was like, can you just give me a ride home? And I was like, yes, I love this. I love having people here. I love popping popcorn and pouring wine for people. And
Sounds very introverted.
Yeah, very introverted.
And then all of my introverted friends are like,
well, all of that would be true for you as an introvert, except for the people part, right? Like you can still pop popcorn and make wine, right? But it would just be for yourself
like,
and not for others.
And there are some nights where I'm like, literally no one come over. I want to sit here in silence and just look at my tree and think about life. But it's very interesting. I don't generally consider myself that extroverted, but I've accumulated a little collection of a bunch of super introverted friends who, by comparison, I'm very extroverted. And it's been interesting in learning, like, hey, you saying you don't want to come tonight isn't you bailing. It's, oh, you actually have legitimate, like, social anxiety. And I am going to honor you honoring that. Mm-hmm. Even though that is not something that it took me a while to understand that. Mm-hmm. People. It was a learning curve of like, oh, no, you actually have really intense anxiety at the idea of coming out tonight. Okay.
Well, I think too, real quick, Sam, before, because I know you wanted to kind of go on a little bit, but Sarah, I think you pointed out something really good about yourself. And I think that because I've talked to people that are like, I don't really like personality tests. Like, they box me in or whatever. It's like personality tests are not designed to like tell you this is who you are and this is all you can be. Yeah. It's to make you aware of the things inside of you so that you can better navigate relationships with other people and understand people better because they're different than you. Yeah. So I think it's important for us to remember too, as we're talking through all of this and as our listeners are engaging, that we don't believe that like the personality tests are the end all be all. Like I'm not defined by a personality test. It does help me realize and understand about certain ways that my personality works. But at the same time, it's not like, well, sorry, I'm an extrovert, so I'm just going to go talk to everybody. Like it is what it is. Or I'm an introvert, so I'm just going to sit at home all day and like, watch TV and not talk to people. Like we can't allow that to just get in the way of us still experiencing what God has for us.
Yeah.
Well, and I think what you both said that really stood out to me is the problems that occur are almost a little bit almost tunnel vision, right? Like you were assuming that your wife had the same personality type or how she dealt with the energy levels, right? So you said like sometimes you have to respect that that's just how a person wants to be on their own and they need their quiet time. So yeah, the biggest problem seems to be that we are attached to those people with similar personalities. So we got to make sure that we don't get that tunnel vision and that we really realize how unique and different everybody is. Mm-hmm. That brings me to the next question. It says, what are some personalities more compatible or easier to love? Like, what are those types of personalities?
I think the ones that are most similar to us, to however we are, because we're thinking in the same way, we're experiencing things in kind of the same way. And I think that's a big part of it. It doesn't, if I meet someone with the same personality type as me, I don't have to think about like, oh, well, how are they going to react to this? Like, no, I know how they're going to react to this because I know how I'm going to react to this. Versus someone who's like the complete opposite. It requires a lot more thought and effort and consideration, which is not a bad thing, but it is easier to look at someone who's very similar to you and be like, we're tracking on the same page. I already know it.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think, that's why it's so important, because it is so easy to relate to people that are this similar personality to us. It is important that we learn those other personality types. But, just like Sarah said, the reason that it is easy is because, our brains are working the same way,
Absolutely.
Like I can, if somebody has very similar personality to me and they arrive at a conclusion, I can, oh yeah. No, I know exactly how you arrived there.
Yeah.
But then other times, like the people that are different than me, it's like, you got to help me fill those gaps. Like
I need you to draw me a map about how
please help me understand like how you got from A to B, because I'm not really seeing that direct correlation. Yeah. But that's like, on a surface level thing too, it's like the point of, or the path of least resistance, right?
Yeah.
You know, we were joking around about sports before the episode started. So like, you know, if we all are fans of the same, like we're all Bucks fans, right? And we all love the Bucks, like then we could sit back and talk Bucks all day. But like if Sarah and I are Bucks fans, and I don't know, you know, Sam's a Steelers fan or something weird like that. But like we could be all pumped up about the Bucks, and Sam's like, I mean, yeah, but like, you know, have you seen Kenny Pickett? Like, so there's those different things. And so we could be really excited, and you're like, well, it doesn't really do anything for me. So, you know, that's obviously a surface level thing, but I do think that it's easier to understand, and to understand not only a person in and of themselves, but also how they arrive and at their thought process and things like that when they're a similar personality. But also, part of the question you asked too was, why is it that certain personality types are easier to love? It's how they manifest themselves, right? Like a lot of times, so for me, I'm an extrovert, which obviously means that like I get energy from being around people and stuff, and I love that. But part of it too is I'm an external processor. So that means, number one, you'll always know what I'm thinking because I'm usually thinking it out loud.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, there probably, if it hasn't happened yet, there'll be an episode where like I'll arrive to a conclusion because I'm actually like talking it out loud and like, okay,
It's
that's
just
what it
be
is.
Rick processing something.
But
for a
also,
full
you
30
know how I'm
minutes.
feeling, and I tell you how I feel.
Yeah.
Not just about me, but about you. I love you. I care about you, whatever. You know, somebody who isn't expressive like that, right? Because being expressive is a part of my personality. So somebody who isn't expressive like that, it makes it extremely difficult sometimes to know how they're feeling about you, about other people, about situations or whatever. And so then what could come across is that they don't care, or that they don't, you know, or that they're apathetic or whatever, when really they're just thinking about it or they're processing it internally.
Yeah, I think a personal story for me would be, so I have the blessing of a great mentor, and my mentor is very achiever oriented, very goal oriented, entrepreneurial. So when I got him, I didn't know all this, right? But we just clicked immediately because we shared those common things. And like you said, I could understand how he felt about drive, or how he felt about going the extra mile to get something done, or taking risks like entrepreneurs do, right? But then I'm mentoring someone right now, and he's not that. He's the exact opposite, which has been great too, because now I get to see from the other side, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's been a great experience to be on two different ends of the spectrum. But I agree with what both of you said. It is easy to love some personality types that are a little less, or a little more like you, I guess, or a little less combative, or a little less aggressive, right?
Right. Well, and even what the way you're saying it is like easier to love them. Like I almost qualify it like it's easier to love them right off the bat, right?
Yeah.
Because you know it feels like a more natural thing with certain personality types, where other ones you got to work at it, right? Like I know people who, like, other people have said, man, that guy's like always grumpy or whatever, and I'm like, dude, he's like one of the funniest people that I know. But it's because I had the relationship with him that he would joke around and stuff with me. Whereas like they don't know him outside of just, you know, seeing him around or whatever. And it's not that he's mean, and it's not that he's grumpy. He just isn't expressive. Yeah. He's a very point A to point B person. Like, you know, tell me what I need to do and I'll go do it. I don't need you to tell me why. I don't need you to give me the story behind it. Just give me the task and I will get the task done, right? And so when you deal with people like that, it can seem like, man, that guy's kind of like a punk. He's like kind of cold. But it's not that. It's just that that's just not how his brain works. It's not how his personality manifests itself.
Yeah, and I think we're all talking about this big umbrella. It's how to love people that think differently than we do, right? That's the whole umbrella that we're going with. And this personality type is just one of the limbs under the tree, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
And I think you're right. I think you're right on to that. It's not that we don't love those people. It just takes us a little longer to figure it out, right? It's not as easy as of a connection. But, you know, and that really is a great feeder to one of the next questions is, how do we love others with different personalities? What kind of tools, like what would you do to help yourself move forward with this? for the people that you don't immediately connect with, right? For the people that might not be the same personality type, like my mentee, right? Compared to my mentor. So, what do you think about that one?
So I know for me personally, it didn't. It was harder for me to connect with people and then in turn to love them or to show them love until I understood what the personality types were.
Yeah.
And what made them up. And I mean, we had, I was blessed because once again, the organization I was with, we had a ton of tools that we could use for that. But like, I had to understand the totality of them, not just my personality, but how the other personalities manifested themselves. And what's really funny now, I can't do it with everyone all the time, but I'm pretty good. Like I can nail someone's Myers-Briggs. Like I can get almost every letter of after, if I hang out with them for a certain period of time. But it also taught me really initially to understand that like, I can't assume what someone's personality is. I can't assume that I'm going to be able to understand how they're feeling and how they're thinking, right? So that means that I have to get to know them and build that relationship with them, because the more I see them in different situations and in different conversations and things, then I can start to realize what their personality looks like. And then because I know how my personality is, and then I know what their personality is, then I know how to communicate with them. For instance, I go back, I said, I have a friend of mine who is very point A to point B. Like he doesn't care about the fluff or whatever else. It's just tell me what I got to do and I'll go do it. So I learned that if I was going to be like, if I was giving him instructions or if we were going to do something together, I didn't have to say, okay, so I want to let you know that last night I was like laying in bed and I had this thought and like, it just really like moved my heart. All I have to go is, hey, listen, I need 10 chairs and 5 tables like here, or, I need, can you help me like paint a room? Like whatever the task is, that was all he needed, because he knew me and knew that if I was asking for something, that it was for a good reason. He didn't even need to hear the reason from me. So, but if I didn't understand his personality, I probably would have gotten really frustrated early on, because I'm like, why do you have to act like that? Right. But because I understood him and because we had a relationship and I understood his personality, I was like, okay, cool. Like I don't have to be offended by this, because it's just, that's how he processes things. So that's okay.
Yeah. I don't have a thought to follow that up. That's just good.
Well, I'll tell you, I like what you're talking about, and the tool you're talking about is education, right?
Yeah.
Understanding the different types of personalities,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if we're educated and we understand how other personalities act and how we can blend with those, that's a great tool. I would say if I had to pick my tool off the top of the head, and obviously it's a tool for many areas that we're going to talk about, it's humility.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You have to realize and let your prideful nature go that not everybody thinks like you, and not everyone has the same personality as you, and not everyone has the same work ethic as you, or reacts the same way.
Right.
And I think that sense of humility can come from centering yourself, realizing that God made that person exactly the way he wanted to make them, and watching Jesus and how he had so much humility with all these fiery apostles, right?
Yeah. Oh, listen.
and so I think my tool would have to be humility.
Yeah. I think something that's been helpful as well is a balance between different personality types are not moral failures. The story that comes to mind is the story about Mary and Martha, right? Martha's very upset that Mary's top priority in that moment is not also everything has to be clean and cooked and perfect and prepped. And Jesus doesn't say, Martha, you're completely wrong for having that heart to want to make things well. But he's like, hang on, pause. You aren't the same person. She is choosing this. And that's a good thing. And so, like, it's not a moral failing that someone's like, oh my gosh, we have to get everything done right now. It's super type A. And that someone else is like, yeah, it'll get done. But at the same time, I know when we had first discussed doing an episode on loving people with different personality types, we kind of started with this idea of using your personality type as an excuse.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an Enneagram 8, so I have to be rude and aggressive. Right. Okay. First of all.
Sorry.
No, you don't.
That you're stuck with.
Right. And so something that has been very helpful for me in figuring this out is, oh my gosh, all of these things are so helpful, but they are tools to help us understand ourselves and understand each other better. And kind of like you were saying, when you understand, when you are in relationship with somebody and you have that understanding of who they are, you can love them a little better. And you can know that your friend doesn't need to know your whole story and actually is probably going to disengage if you sit there and go, hey, let me tell you. But that comes from knowing his personality and knowing him and being able to love and see him in that.
Yeah, and Sarah, something that you said in what you just said was, I thought that was really insightful, is, there are actually strengths and weaknesses to each personality type. And so that is why, in the big picture of things, like, God created us to do life together, because there are things that we're really good at naturally, and then there are things that don't come natural to us, but they do come natural to other people.
Yeah.
And so that why we collaborate together and we work together as a team, or work together, as the family that God created us to be in. Then we actually get to highlight each other's strengths and cover each other's weaknesses. Even doing this podcast together has been really cool, because all of us bring to the table something very different. And while some of them may be similar, there are very different personality types that are here represented. And, what's cool about that is that each one of those things we've been able to kind of pick up for each other where we're not able to.
Yeah.
The other side of it, though, is that just because those things are weaknesses doesn't mean they can't be developed, right?
Absolutely.
So I remember I took one of the assessments they do is the DISC assessment, and like one of the things the DISC assessment, it gives you like, I'm an I, I'm a high I, like
we were all
super
shocked.
high I. And so anyway, but one of the things that it was funny is, like, I was devoid of C, which is conscientiousness. Like, it was 0. And conscientiousness, not in the sense of like, hey, I'm not, it's not like emotional awareness or anything, but just like, I tend to just jump into things and I don't really consider the consequences sometimes or whatever. So, there's not that. But what was really cool is, like, I, partly by intention, but partly just by God orchestrating it, was able to surround myself with people that were really good at, like, analyzing things and like really good at structure and stuff like that. And so I was able to, over time, develop a part of me that wasn't natural. So the other cool part about this is that, yes, God created us in the way that he created us, and yeah, our personalities may, rub a little bit. But the cool part is that we can work on some of those things too, to be better at them. It may not be a natural place for us to go, but we can still live in those spaces and not feel like, oh, what am I doing? Like this is a part of who I am, and I can make it maybe not a strength, but at least an average part of, like, my personality.
Well, I'll tell you, this has been great so far, and I would just like to ask you guys, what's like one takeaway that you would like to give the audience based on our discussion about how to think differently? I love people to think differently, especially when it comes to personality.
I mean, mine would just be, take time to learn about the different personality types in whatever way. Like, there's not a one size fits all personality test, whether it's Myers-Briggs or Enneagram or whatever.
Absolutely.
But take time to get to understand that, because it really can help you understand people more. And that's what it's all about, right? One of the big main reasons we're doing this podcast is so that we can love people better. And loving people better, such a huge component of that is understanding them more.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. But I think also, to add on, is just going back to that, you have to spend time with the person. You might be able to look at them and go, oh, they're a textbook version of this type. But even within that, they are still going to have their own little quirks of how that type manifests. Like, okay, I know a bunch of Enneagram 8s. We all look very different. And so it's seeing seeing the type and using it as a tool to see the person.
That's good.
And I think my tool, to reiterate, would have to be the humility tool. Understanding that these are children of God, and we are going to be different, and that's okay. And really magnifying how great that person is by bringing yourself down a little bit, right? We don't need to be prideful that everyone has to have our kind of personality type. We need to have the humility that ours isn't the best.
Mhm.
It's just
Yeah.
one, right? And so I think that's my tool. Well, I got to tell you, it's another great discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for everything today. And remember, if you are enjoying this, please subscribe. Check us out on YouTube or Apple or Spotify or iHeartRadio. Subscribe. We love to hear your comments. And thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. See you guys next time.